Welcome to Made Unmade. My name is Johan Melin, and I'm your host through the films you never heard of, through the films that was forgotten and, according to some, safely put down without sedatives in a drawer, unknown location. With this podcast, I pick up the films that I did made, because when you do write a film and you happen to be a writer-director like me, you write to get it made, right? So, interestingly enough, I had this principle to never write for the drawer, and in spite of that, due to many reasons, some of these films got lost and, didn't happen. Today's episode is called Nanning. And I will start by telling you the fantastic story of Nanning, and then I will go into how the development made. I think where I was at the moment when I wrote Nanning was some sort of a crossroad creatively. I had started the Danish film school, a dream of mine as one of the youngest directors ever. I had made a feature film called Köftbögen, and on the background of Köftbögen, I got some development money from that I had this idea about the loneliest girl in the world who meets love and their impossible love story in a small town, which was, of course, Herrljunga, the place where I'm from and actually live in again after 25 years. But it was also a story about creativity. And at that point also I had been writing basically for 8 years. And the writing had resulted in various films. I had made quite a lot of films during the years of between 1999 to 2002. And if Köftbögen was still in the making, so to speak, we were still struggling to finish it. And I jumped on the opportunity of trying to develop this film. But I do also must say that I have problems with writing a treatment, because to me it's a little bit like, you can see this in general in Sweden and Denmark, that they generally ask you for a treatment at first. But if you come from the side of writing scripts like I do, actually I found it easier to write the whole script and then write the treatment on top of that. Yeah. So, here it goes. SOFIA NANNING is 24 years old, lives in smalltown Herrljunga, and works at the local bed factory where she's manufacturing beds. At the age of 24, she's still a virgin and has been acting as the family's caretaker after her father mysteriously disappeared 7 years ago. The whole family is in some kind of shock of the bohemic father who just left without a trace. The mother is still wishing for her to come home. The sister, Karin, who has stopped speaking, and her nervous little brother, Marcus, who doesn't really know what to do with his life. Sofia's joy is punk music, but she's kind of hiding under a protective sheath of living in oblivion and anonymity. Every day, the same routine. Going to the factory, assembling the springs for the mattresses, going home, cooking for the family, going to bed, next day. At the factory, something is happening. There, her foreman, Simon Nero, a man with aspirations of becoming a policeman and acting as the local sheriff, kind of, is secretly in love with Sofia, even though he has a child coming and expecting with his girlfriend, Sarah. It's a male-driven place, and every day Simon tries to somewhat hit on Sofia without any luck. She assembles her beds in silence and goes on with her life. Then, on Midsummer's Eve, where all the people of the small town is out celebrating, Sofia goes out and watching the people in the Folkets Park, how they party, everybody's drunk, filled of happiness and in the ever-going light. And when Sofia is walking home, listening to her music, she doesn't hear nor see when a car comes driving very, very fast and hits her. She flies up on the hood, bam, cracks the windshield. Maybe she's dead. A man comes out, and his name is JAKOB Lodin. He manages to get out a few words where she lives and drives her home. And as opposite what you might have thought, Sofia is somewhat happy to be driven down by this handsome fella in this Dodge Challenger. They decide to see each other next day. So, on the Midsummer's Day, Sofia goes to her first date ever. And it soon turns out that JAKOB Lodin is a criminal who has been in for manslaughter. And now he's basically living in his car, and Sofia somehow feels for this man and wants to take care of him, and offers herself that she might be able to find him a job or something. But the town is not as forgiving as Sofia, and soon the rumor is going that a killer has decided to reside in the small town. Especially Simon, who is also sick with jealousy. He starts to plot and plan how to destroy SOFIA NANNING's only joy in life. And slowly a love story evolves between these two lost souls, JAKOB LODIN and SOFIA NANNING. Simon says that he can maybe fix some kind of work for JAKOB, but he rigs the whole thing as some kind of security deal. But he rigs it, and when JAKOB arrives at the factory, Simon and his men is beating him down and also abusing Sofia in the factory. Horrible. And he threatens her that she can never say anything about this to anybody. And they think, of course, JAKOB is dead, but he turns out to be in some kind of coma state. And now everything is changed. Sofia, who previously had not been fine but been living in this routine where she's in her girl bedroom. Now the walls are getting smaller and smaller. She visits JAKOB every day and decides to take revenge upon Simon Nero. And she approaches him at the local bar with a gun. And Simon is devastated as well. You know, he lost all his career prospects of becoming a policeman, and has been actually fired from his work after they have reviewed the CCTV footage. And Sofia is slowly losing this. She also stops during the romance with JAKOB to take her anti-epileptica, and she has this seizure at home where the walls are kind of coming in to her, and it starts to rain inside. And 1 year later we meet her in work therapy, kind of like the same job as she had before, but now as in a rehab center. And from there on, SOFIA NANNING is biding her time, and is seen as a crazy person. But eventually she comes out, and the terms have also shifted. During her romance with Jakob, she had this idea of going away together to Finland. They would. Jakob Lodin, he's kind of like a dreamer, so he just had this idea. He's saying, like, I always wanted to go to Finland. Yeah, but it's big. Yeah, but, where in Finland? Yeah, just Finland. So she comes out of rehab, and she decides she cannot let him, this free man, hooked up to all these cords and life-saving supplies, instilled in this coma state. So she puts a pillow over his head and puts him to sleep. And then she gathers her stuff and disappears from the small town with a typewriter in her hand. We know that she will eventually write her story and leaves this small town tragedy behind her. Still to this day, it's something very, very haunting about it, I think because it depicts somehow this Swedish or Scandinavian loneliness in a very, very heartbreaking way. And it's not, how to say, with a lack of humor. When you tell the story like this, I realize, okay, this is how they saw it. It's probably very, very, very dark. And it was, but it had also this kind of very, very twisted, absurd humor that I'm a big fan of. And I also think, like, for these different characters, it's also supposed to be saying that this was in a time when Sweden and I guess most of Europe started to outsource their factories. A town like Herrljunga had been very dependent on their factories in the, how to say, it's like the clash between the old and the new, the decline of industrialization. Also, you have this time in Sweden where a lot of people started to medicate, All of a sudden, a lot of these industry nations became Prozac republics, and I wanted to show that side, and I thought it was very, very exciting to be able to find this very, very small story. Basically, it's like 1 year later, I've made this. At that point, I was fascinated telling this kind of horrible story by H.C. Andersen called A Mother, which is about a mother who loses her child and she goes after him to the death realm. and death is setting up these horrible challenges for her in order to get her child back. And she's doing all these sacrifices, and in the end the child can't be saved, and she has kind of given everything. And that became the film Down Below Zero with Louise Meritz, which was my midterm film at the Danish Film School. And when I was writing this, I actually envisioned different lead actresses in it. At some point it was Louise Meritz who was going to play this Nanning. At some point it was Rikke Louise Andersson. And at some point Jakob Cedergren was going to play this JAKOB Lodin. And that character later evolved actually to my graduation film called Steppenwolves. So you had these kind of elements that I was circling around with. And also at this point when I wrote it, I was going to make it in Sweden. And I remember I had Rainer Gördes, who was going to play Simonero, and Nicky Nordenskjöld, very fantastic actress who unfortunately passed away. She was going to play this Sara, and I also think at some point I was thinking about Paulina Hansson, great actress today working as a makeup artist and production designer, I think. So I was kind of, and then also at some point I was thinking about having Anna Fabricius to play the lead. And also when I made a big shift then in 2005 and decided to do this film in Danish, I wanted Kim Bodnia to play Simonero. And it's been this always for me since I moved to Denmark. Sometimes this, you might assume that it's very, very easy, this transition. You're saying like, okay, let's go from Sweden to Denmark, but it's not really the same. There are some fundamental differences between Sweden and Denmark. I would say maybe mostly in the mentality and how things are going. But enough about that. I also remember I wanted to make like a dysfunctional family story, and in some ways I guess all families are dysfunctional, but I wanted to see what happened if we have this kind of character who not have had time to live her life. SOFIA NANNING, she has only taken care of the family. Her mother was also working at the factory, and after the father went down, had some kind of breakdown and was let off, and she claims that it's physical, but obviously it's like with everything, psychophysical in this sense. And so Sophia has taken the role of kind of like the one keeping the family together, but she has also chosen to kind of, she never got the opportunity to be a teenager, or never got the opportunity to live her life as fullest, at its fullest. And she had this idea of getting away, and she wanted to become a writer. And she sits every day after work trying to write. You know, nothing comes out. And then we have this JAKOB Lodin, who she meets. Actually, the whole love story between them started when I was living in Stockholm, and I was living at very close to Maria kyrkogård, where also the famous Cornelis Vreeswijk is buried. Fun fact was that somebody every night or every day somebody put a glass of beer on his grave, and the next day it was always drunken. So there I passed this cemetery every day, and there was this tombstone, an old one, saying Lodin and Nanning's grav, the grave of Lodin and Nanning. And I always started to kind of make up a story, because I was passing this tombstone every day, about who were these Lodin and Nanning. And eventually I very early on, this must have been in the late 90s, had this idea of making a film centered around their tragic love story, you know. And then with time, this kind of naturally evolved into the story of SOFIA NANNING and JAKOB Lodin. And then I remember that you know, you have this, that the inciting incident must happen in the film, right? So this, I literally wanted them to meet with a kind of bang, you know. So he, and I thought it was this kind of beautiful start of a love story, where JAKOB is literally driving her down by accident, you know. And the funny thing was also that after she's been driven down and she's there in the backseat, she's kind of, because he's so nice to her and so kind of caretaking, so she doesn't see the kind of the wrong in this. Of course, obviously it's an accident, but she's kind of checking him out like you would do in a more romantic setting, so to speak. And it was all the time these kind of quirky, very absurd ways in Nanning. I guess it's also about, you know, how you deal with your loneliness, because I think at that point in my life, I think most people, you have gone through some relationships, but most of all, you're kind of like finding out what kind of person you are, and which you're gonna have to deal with the rest of your life, you know. And then obviously this very shy and stuck girl was inside of me, you know. There's no question that the film is basically seeing everything through her point of view, in a very, very strong way, you know. And I think also slowly this is evolving, you know. So I also had this idea of making it very, very, very sweet and almost a little bit childlike. This, as I remember how JAKOB LODIN was that he's this kind of, he's also have had a kind of a story that Sofia has had, in this sense that he got caught for manslaughter trying to stop his girlfriend's father from doing something to her. And so he's been basically in prison for the last 7 years, right? And kind of missing out also on what it's like to be alive, to be in love, to be with somebody, So they both have this lonesome longing, and they find this in their meeting. And then, of course, immediately this is disturbed by Simonero, who is this very, very strict foreman at the factory, who's also in love with Sofia. They had some kind of backstory where they went out on a date or something, but he ended up with the girl who was like the local Lucia. Here in Sweden we have this Lucia. So he ended up like with Miss Smalltown Lucia, and made her pregnant. And they really don't match at all, except for maybe in these terms that they're alpha male and alpha female, if you can talk about that they, or at least they think so. And then you also kind of had this, I had this idea of a society who is totally unforgiven against this killer, which Jakob is in a way. And that's, the kind of duality of that, because as an audience, of course, we understand that, Jakob is not the best, God's best child. He has taken a life, but on the other hand, we know also that it happened when he was very young, and he did it in order to trying to protect the girl he loved, So you have this kind of double set of feelings, and that was what made the Nunning very, very interesting. And you come into the very, very poignant point where you can feel that change is in the air, right? And everybody's afraid of change, SOFIA NANNING is afraid of change. Her family's afraid of change, because when she meets Jakob, her kind of engagement in being the family's kind of motor, so to speak. She's not doing her duties, as she did before, and it's all kind of falling apart. So I guess I also wanted this kind of classic story, kind of not Cinderella story, but in this sense that she is a little bit of like a housekeeper, or, in a way, all this security or this very strict life she has, it's also a prison. So in many ways, Nunning is a prison movie, where she has to get out, I was also inspired by Ibsen's A Dollhouse, where Nora has to leave in the end. And I was also inspired by The Glass Menagerie by Tennessee Williams, about this girl who has these problems walking. She has this stiff leg operation, and her very, how to say, juvenile romance with this guy who is on a completely different planet, you know. And I guess also that the film is kind of leading up to this point that Sofia and Jakob, they are, you know, kind of discussing whether they should stay or they should go. You know, of course, she wants to go out on a, you know, adventure of romance and love, and let's go to Finland. Let's do, let's you know, discover the world together, right? But Jakob, he has in some way, you know, never established himself anywhere. So he kind of gets caught in the small town also, as I remember. And he has also has some, which was very popular back then, and I guess still is, but online instead, this kind of poker machine, you know. So he kind of gets stuck there, you know, in the small town mentality, and has this kind of romantic idea of that everybody can have a second chance, you know, just because she is showing such kindness and goodness to Jakob. Maybe the rest of the town will as well. And then you have this kind of sinister plot where Simon is orchestrating this break-in and this horrible assault on Sofia that is kind of taking everything away. And as I remember it, also the way how it's happening is that they orchestrate this break-in where they is framing or nailing Jakob, and they are escaping in his car, and then this accident happens. This is at least this is how it was in one version, and in another version I think they just basically beat him to a coma state. I guess also this whole film is some kind of metaphor for, you know, what I had experienced with creativity up until that point, and this painful experience also of at least so I think or thought that you had to dig deep into your feelings in order to make a great script. You know? I wanted to make a tearjerker. I wanted this to be this impossible love story between a man who nobody believed in and a girl who believed in nobody, or nobody believed in either, and kind of what happened with these two misfits if they fall in love, and you know, and the question also the film is rising is like, are these, when you get used to kind of play the character of the misfit in your own life, or you play like, let's say, second fiddle in your own life, do can you get out of that role you have been given? Can Sofia get out of the role of being, you know, the good girl that is on one hand holding the family together, and on the other side maybe she is also the cause of her suffering in a way? And the answer as such is yes, because after Sofia is also experiencing this total, how to say, breakdown, she also, when she comes out, she is gathered. She is taking Jakob's life because she cannot stand to see this man who, at least to her, was somebody who embodied freedom for her. And then she's kind of ready to leave and go her own way. And in some strange ways, if we're gonna go upon that trail, she also becomes the father, you know, where the roads becomes her middle name, and she going to where? We don't know. And finally also, as I see here in the script, is that she is finally able to write down her story, because she hasn't gotten one up until she had gone through this tragedy. She hasn't gotten a full story, you know, because it was a life just consisting of make-up routines in order to function. It was this kind of life that was in a respirator in a way, and she had to pull that all out in order to start living again. So as I remember it, it was kind of a happy ending. Nanning walking down the road herself, typewriter in hand. We don't know where, but we will assume that it's a good place. And I wrote the script in the summer of 2002. Memphis, they passed on it. I think they could see some qualities. At this point also, I guess, different players in the movie industry had started to kind of find some interest in my work. But so it didn't happen. And I kind of just went on to do my school things, and then I think also this Nanning character was kind of reoccurring in different shapes, like I previously mentioned, both in my midterm film, and to a certain extent she comes back also in Steppenwolves, that we're gonna talk about in another episode. And then I graduated from film school, and there was this opportunity for the graduation students all over the Nordic countries to pitch a story, you know, their first feature film. And my film Köftbögen had come out, and I decided to pitch this film. And it went really good. It gained some kind of momentum, or had a lot of interest in it, but it never manifested. Then I got some money to develop this for Tura Film, but as a Danish story, and it kind of stalled to a lot of reasons. I think I did a very, very good development of this story that I told you, tried to adapt it to Danish circumstances, which was kind of, when I think about it, it's maybe that difference in tone is that I had this idea of making things in a very, very dark, almost Finnish, not like a cowboys making movie, but the tone was this Nordic dark, and I must say as two things about that in this film, as it was written, you never saw basically any violence. All the violence that you hear about, that JAKOB has done, or also this that is happening to Nanning, you never saw any of it, and still people reacted to this film as a very, 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 very dark film. And I think it's interesting in this sense that we also live in this era right now, where they somehow monopolize the violence as such. You see this TV series that is said to mimic reality, kids shooting kids and such, and that is somehow okay, and nobody's asking, what are these kids that are, committing violence here in Sweden. I think the problem of violence is that on film and TV series is this kind of very cut off. What you see today is like nobody really cares, Nobody has any moral ambiguity or has some kind of moral remorse, about it. It's just as easy as it is, for real, to hold a replica of a gun in a film scene and kind of look numb when you do it. I think that is much more dangerous than what I tried to do here was to create this kind of characters who had a lot of, passive violence in them. But I was amazed that people thought it was such a dark story. Obviously, Romeo and Juliet is also a dark story, if you want to. And as usually, when this film didn't happen, I started to kind of build up in my mind, how could I do this the same way as that I've done, like Köftbögen, or what was yet to come, how I did the brightening preludium, could I do this film, produce it myself, do a cheap and fast film, and it never came to that point, unfortunately. So Nanning was all the time the film, maybe that I'm still to this date when I open it, it's, this long lost love that never got away, and a part of you is trying to somehow protect yourself and saying like, all right, it was not meant to be or so, but I can see now when I follow the thread of Nanning that it was a fantastic story about the loneliest girl in the world and how she met and fell in love with this lonely guy coming out of the prison, JAKOB Lodin, and their totally impossible love story. It's also like this love story that is deemed to be, going down before it even started. And I guess also, if you talk about creativity, is that it's probably also my kind of origin story of birth of an artist, as such that you, because I always wondered, could you tell an interesting story without having experienced it yourself, Do you need to experience tragedy, and do you have to be a traumatized person to make great art, And maybe also at that time when I wrote this, I mean, obviously I had my struggles like everybody, but I didn't have this, how to say, I didn't have this traumatic childhood, quite the reverse. I had a very happy childhood, and I was at the same time in this point in my life where I started to kind of wonder if you need a tragedy in order to be able to fully blossom as an artist. And I guess Nanning is the story about that as well. And then, of course, tragedy hit me and hits everybody when you least expect it. But I guess it's also about when she meets this guy, she understands that she has to, her own way has not been an alternative until she meets him, And I remember also I wanted to have this interesting, that the same guy that she's in love with, he's maybe also the biggest antagonist of the story, because he also wants her to stay, This idea about getting to Finland, this is something she wants. This for him is more of a dream of an escape, and in his mind, they, will maybe never. He doesn't want to go to Finland. Actually, he wants to stay there because he wants to try to become ordinary and well-adjusted like she is. So it's this very, very, how to say, fucked up polarity between Nanning and Lodin that I loved. And I think that it also has some kind of coda saying like, all right, everything will rain down on you eventually or come down upon you eventually, but it's what you can always make up 500,000 excuses for not doing what you want with your life. But in the end, it's only that step, that small step that you take right now, that will matter. And if you want to do it, you do it. My name is Johan Melin, and you're listening to Made, Unmade. Oh, one more thing. So, what happened really? Was it over and done with after I had put this to sleep, or? I'm not sure. I guess that when people read the script under tears, they understood that here was somebody who wanted to tell some kind of story that was not seen or had not so common at that point. But one thing led to another and so on, and I put it down, the great tragedy of Lodin and Nanning, and I guess it came up again and again, some of the themes in the future works that I did make, but it's a lost gem, and it's been interesting to hold it up into the light for a little while together with you.